All right, guys, we're gonna do this is gonna be fun. I saw this myself. I don't think somebody sent this to me. I just saw it in my YouTube recommended page because we had reacted to a different thing before yesterday's video the other day. And this one's called How Woke Channels Are Radicalizing People. So I was like, that's not going to really matter. You know, I think first he's a little bit of a silly goose sometimes. But then it's Pethan. And I don't like this guy. I'm not a particular fan of him. Okay, he was one of the people who tried to, virtue signal dunk on SuperMega. I've talked about it a million times. I don't feel like rehashing the whole thing. Just look up Papa Gut SuperMega if you want to get like a full breakdown on all my old stuff. I'm not interested in qualifying every little thing that I've ever done for 20 minutes before a video starts. But I'm not a particular fan of this guy. I don't think he's a very good person. I think he's very disingenuous. I think Nick is Not Green made an apology for his role in it, which I thought was decent. Have yet to see his apology. So let's get this party started.
Take the opportunity to make a video. I wanted to take the opportunity to make a video about something that's made me pretty frustrated lately. This is a video essay about the groomer narrative. The word groomer has lost all meaning because
oh, that's true. That is true. I agree with that.
Conservatives won't stop saying it to cartoons. It's basically just a buzzword for homophobes to signal how much they think about children.
I don't think I've ever...
some of that could be true. I don't know his specific video, so we'll see what your commentary is on it. But what he's saying isn't necessarily untrue.
Rolled my eyes at something before, as hard as I just did at that last statement.
Okay.
Wanting to keep children from viewing explicit content makes you a child abuser?
Did I not hear that?
Jerome Jackson super chatted $4.99. Did you already talk about the TWOMAD thing that happened yesterday?
Yeah, I did.
Insane how he died with Overwatch playing in the background.
Yeah, I did. I talked about it earlier.
It's a buzzword for homophobes to signal how much they think about children.
I don't think
he said anything about sexual.
I've ever rolled my eyes at something before, as hard as I just did at that last statement.
What?
Wanting to keep children from viewing explicit content makes you a child abuser?
I'm a little... Okay,
Did Hassan
I'll see
write
where
this
it goes.
video? Because that sounds like a take he would have. Wait,
I'm
Hassan
looking
can't
at it.
write. But at the very least, this guy definitely scripted his video when he was high. Well, anyway, for the past few weeks...
I think one of the arguments that people will make is that there is kind of an overreaction from some conservatives that labels like anything LGBTQ as sexualized content when it necessarily isn't. I'm not saying that these things don't exist, but it's, painting it all as sexualized material, and I think that's the point, but okay.
I've been going down the groomer denial rabbit hole because of this video that I made here. During this time,
Oh, yeah, I watched that. Listen, here's the thing. I'm going to just give you a quick recap. That's the video I watched. Listen, drag is weird. It's a bunch of gay dudes dressing up like girls. That's weird. I'm not trying to be rude about it, but it's a little weird. That being said, when you get past your uncomfortableness, I don't think that means at all drag is sexualized. Right? That's it.
Super chatted $2.
That's the whole thing.
PP piss boy.
Exactly. PP piss boy. Not all drag is sexualized. Now, in that video, there was apparently some kid who wanted to do drag. And everybody's like, well, it must be the parents. Here's the thing. I would imagine that a lot of, you talk to any trans person, they'll say, I knew I was trans since I was a kid. If you talk to a lot of drag queens, they'll say oh, I wanted to do this since I was a kid. I still think it's weird, but as long as they're not doing sexualized drag, I don't care. I just think it's weird, and I wouldn't let my kid do it. Okay? But I don't think it's grooming. This is what I'm talking about. You can be uncomfortable with something, think that it's weird. You can even think that it's wrong. You can even think that's bad. But when you start applying narratives as if these parents are trying to harm their kids, that's when you're getting into this conspiracy aspect. And there's a lot of that linked to LGBTQ stuff. That's it. You're allowed to dislike it. You're allowed to think it's weird. I'm not going to really want a feminine boy. If he turns out to be feminine, I will love him and accept him for who he is. But, I love gay people. Gay people love me. But there's no magical groomer narrative attached to it. That's the only point that I'm making. Drag was always for adults. I mean, listen, if you've watched old drag stuff, it's just old stuff. I'm not talking about new stuff. This is the thing. Drag typically will emulate. Drag typically emulates the music of a particular generation. I've seen some Aretha Franklin type of drag, I guess you'd say, and that's really what it does. As music gets more sexualized, you do see more sexualized drag. But the thing is you should be calling it out for both the music and the drag. And the thing is that people don't necessarily do that. There's a lot of outrage over drag, but there's very little outrage over beauty pageants, which I think are disgusting. People might say yeah, no, beauty pageants are bad too, but there's not a single piece of legislation that's trying to stop beauty pageants, but conservative, politicians are very, very against drag. If you made something against both, I'd be like, okay. But you know what I mean? It seems like the primary focus is more about, you know, something that's against gay people than it is for protecting children. That's pretty much where I'm coming from. So it's not always inherently sexual, just to be clear. Some of it is. Kids shouldn't be around that. But I'm just saying, that's the only point that I'm making. Okay? Let's keep it going.
Many people who
rightfully
say that child beauty pageants and child marriage are wrong.
Yeah, they are wrong.
Yet they'll completely deny the sexually explicit behavior that occurs at family-friendly drag shows.
Okay. There's not a lot of family-friendly drag shows. That one was really weird, for sure. I agree with that. But again, okay, sure. I guess I agree. I mean, like, I feel like people are calling out the ones like that, which are weird. But yeah, like the one at the nightclub was also really fucking weird. I don't know why you're doing stuff like that. But yeah.
So when it comes to owning the cons on weird stuff like child marriage, though I haven't seen any mainstream conservatives support that, creators like this guy, Ethan, are all for it. But when someone points out, hey, they're hosting stripper dances at bars for kids with performers who go by names like Loose in the Behind.
All right, just to be clear with this one, I think this was very inappropriate. I know because they reference this a lot. You know, there doesn't seem to be too many instances of drag kid shows, which is a good thing, by the way, in my opinion. But whatever. The context for this is like they're all like toddlers there, and the event is, and I still think it's wrong, but the event is, hey, moms, bring your kids because we know you can't get somebody to babysit for you. That's the context. It's still inappropriate, but like it's clearly not grooming. It's so that the parents can or the moms can enjoy drag because women love drag for whatever reason, without having to find a babysitter so that they, you know, whatever, they don't have to spend money or whatever. It has nothing to do with the kids there. That's more of just the selling point of like basically just bring your kids and whatever. I still think it's weird and it's wrong. I don't think it's appropriate, but like the context there isn't to groom kids. Just to be clear.
Then it's, well, that doesn't happen, and you're a homophobe for talking about it.
Children are generally not present at drag shows hosted in bars.
Generally.
They probably aren't.
Kids should never go to drag shows and bars, especially bars with signs that say...
I think when they say... Okay, just to be clear, I want to replay that because... Okay.
In bars.
That doesn't happen, and you're a homophobe for talking about it.
Children are generally not present at drag shows hosted in bars.
So what she's saying is that the overwhelming majority of cases of drag shows at bars, children aren't there. They're not saying that sometimes kids show up. There are very limited times where, like, he's about to show us that nightclub where that was very inappropriate. Like, yes, but I just want to be clear, like, what he's thinking that they're saying is that sometimes kids show up to these things. But no, is what she's saying is that, like, it really never happens, and that the legislation that's being created is overreacting to an issue that doesn't really exist at all, because it doesn't really exist. So that's pretty much what they're talking about.
Generally, kids should never go to drag shows and bars, especially bars with signs that say,
well, you shouldn't. The kid, if it's at a bar, I don't think a kid should be there.
It's not going to lick itself. This should not be a thing that happens. How do we even live in a world where this isn't?
I agree, but that happened like a year or two ago. I don't think that this isn't a reoccurring issue. Like when we talk about this topic, it's always referring to the same two things over and over again. And it's like, that's bad. Call that out. But I don't think that we need to make legislation around it, because we think for the most part, people, or we don't need to make legislation that bans all drag, because that's what a lot of the legislation is trying to do. That's it. You know, but okay.
Something that everyone agrees on.
Kitty Demure is a drag performer, and she joins me now. So, Kitty, you don't perform in front of children, do you?
No, nor would I. If I was performing for an audience and I saw a child, I would walk out.
Yeah, I don't see why that isn't a common take.
I agree.
I don't see why.
I think that is a common take. But okay.
Why these guys aren't mortified when they see kids in the audience. Okay. This is just as bad as when idiot parents bring their 6-year-old children to concerts that clearly aren't child-friendly.
Sure.
So why do...
But I will say that there's no legislation trying to ban that, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Also, like, if a parent brings a kid to a drag show and the drag show is not for kids, that's the parent's fault. It's not the drag performer's fault. And I feel like sometimes, and I'm not talking about all the time. I'm not talking about this guy, but sometimes they'll make it like this general thing of like, oh, see, they're trying to groom kids, when it's like the parents are the ones bringing the kids, right? Again, I'm against the groomer narrative, not against the calling out of this stuff. Something to keep in mind.
Do these drag queens keep foisting these performances on children?
Well, a lot of the performers...
What do you mean keep? Like, how often does this happen? Like, give me another example.
I can only speak for the performers. A lot of them are just like low-level wage workers. If you notice, some of them aren't the most beautiful, the most talented. They're typically from a local club or dive bar.
That's hilarious. He just said it was a skill issue. I mean, it makes sense, especially considering that there are things like a ton of women having no problem marketing adult content to kids on Twitch because they can't compete with more skilled e-girls on adult platforms.
I guess that's a comparison.
And of course, I have yet to see creators, such as the main subject of this video, Ethan is Online, actually discuss the material that conservatives or Twitter accounts like Gays Against Groomers are mad about. This is despite the fact that Ethan actually does show clips like this during a whole compilation of his enemies discussing the issue, who are very clearly talking about inappropriate sexual environments that kids have been put in, or sexually explicit material in books like Genderqueer being available to minors in school libraries.
I get. So the Genderqueer book, it's not a book that's supposed to be about sex. I think it's a book that's just supposed to talk about somebody's life. It's not required reading material. There are sexually explicit. There are some books that have adult-ish content in it for like teenagers that are like 16, 17, 18. I don't necessarily care about that. It's not porn. It's probably just like anatomy stuff in general, from what I remember from that book. It's not really supposed to be like this insane thing. But
It's not merely about children being exposed to gay people. But does he talk about any of this stuff?
Well, from what I remember, what the book is about, like, a book is about some fucking non-binary person and their struggles growing up. I mean, my teacher used to make me say the N-word in class all the time. I don't know. I feel like there is sometimes going to be more adult content in the books, but I don't mean like sexual content. Like just more adult themes in books, and like that's kind of part of growing up. No, it's not porn. It's not like sexually explicit type of stuff. It's like, oh, hey, I'm a non-binary person growing up, and here's what I went through. And like, do I think it's weird? Yeah, sure, but I don't think that it's the same thing as like a grooming narrative. But
no, he just calls conservatives bigots who hate LGBT people with no actual evidence of that. And
there's a lot of evidence of that. Unfortunately, the conservative platform doesn't really have any real economic reform attached to it, which is changing because they're realizing that hyper focusing on LGBTQ people is not really working. Yeah, that's why there's like this huge trans hysteria and like LGBTQ hysteria, because they don't have like any actual platform outside of like, oh, gay's bad. So yeah.
And moves on. He does, however, give us a history lesson.
It's 1977, the same year Star Wars first premieres in theaters. But 1977 is also the same year the Save Our Children Coalition was formed. Thanks to the effort to save our children, laws protecting gay people from discrimination and protecting their rights to housing and public services were stripped all over the country in the late 70s. This exact thing happened in Minnesota, and overnight, gay people were allowed to be rejected from job applications and housing applications.
Is that real?
Just because they were gay.
Yes, that all sucks. It was not very fun to be a gay person before like the year 2000. Interesting that
probably later than that. I don't think that gay people were allowed to get married to like 2016, but okay.
He shows a clip of Joe Biden here, a man who has opposed gay rights for most of his political career.
Yeah, sure.
The Defense of Marriage Act, where we've all voted, not where I voted and others said, look, marriage is between a man and a woman, and states must respect that.
I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure his take was like, oh, they can have something that gives the same tax benefits, but they shouldn't call it marriage. Sure.
That was from 2006. I actually can't find any evidence that him or Obama supported gay marriage until their second term. They definitely didn't support it when they took office, and they only flipped in support of it when it was politically convenient. Very brave.
Well, it wasn't politically convenient. It was like ruled in to happen, so they took it and said, okay, there you go.
But I'm not sure how Ethan's history lesson is relevant at all. Are gay people being denied housing in the current year? No? Then this point is irrelevant, and it's not what conservatives and non-woke people are talking about. No one is trying to stop gay people from buying a house in the current year. How about talking...
Just to be clear, it was like last year, before gay marriage was codified by Joe Biden, that conservatives were trying to revoke gay marriage. Just to be clear. So I want to make it, a lot of people like to say that like gay people aren't having issues. They're not having as many issues as they used to. That's 1,000% true. But there are still issues, that it's still, unfortunately gay marriage was codified, but I remember Ted Cruz going on a whole tear about it. So to say like, oh, there's nothing left, that nobody cares anymore. They do. There still are issues, but okay.
About what people actually have a problem with, which is children being exposed to sexualized content. No? Instead, he says this.
In 2023, any fucking freak bozo, no matter who they are, can pop up on your YouTube screen and talk about how fucking trans people are bad and buy my t-shirt that says trans people are bad. And now we can start talking about really creepy shit about children now because we're talking about trans people. Conservatives just, they have children on their mind all the time. You can't blame them for wanting to talk about children every chance they get.
God.
It's probably not a particularly good defense to say that conservatives are just pedophiles because they're worried about trans people. I don't think that's what it is. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with gay and trans people, and so like it manifests itself in like some form of bigotry. Religious people tend to not be a big fan of gay or trans people. I don't know that they actually want to fuck kids like Ethan's suggesting. I don't think you're going to really change anybody's mind about that by saying that, but
This guy is insufferable. You know what he's like? He's like if the average viewer in Hassan's Twitch chat made a YouTube channel and it got a decent
Yeah, Clarence Thomas was literally saying he wants to go after gay marriage next. Yeah.
amount of subs. The typical Hassan strategy of deflecting and dodging the actual issues while calling your opponents stupid pedos is very present in Ethan's videos. But let's get to the part where he destroys the conservatives, Ben Shapiro style.
The groomer narrative is a weapon, and it's propagated by grifters and useful idiots from all over media. And while the groomer narrative may be powerful as a propaganda tool, it's not very sound. But yeah, sure, let's say that there is any sort of legitimacy behind the idea that gay people are grooming kids. Not that there's any fucking study to support that ever, but, you know, if that's the narrative we're going with, we're gonna have to talk some facts and logic. So if you're a conservative watching, this is the part where you're gonna turn off the video. I know you guys aren't really huge on facts and logic, so...
All right, Ethan, I'm ready for it. Give me the facts and logic. Own those Daily Wire subscribers with your research skills.
Became a member.
Hey, thank you so much for the membership. What the fuck is this?
I found on this is a UCLA Williams Institute study on demographics of people in sex offender registries all across the United States. So right from the top, basics. 80% of the people in this registry are straight. I think we're done.
Got him, buddy. 80% of the
I don't understand what like his point was trying to be there. I don't get it.
people on the sex offender registry are straight. Overall, straight people commit more sex crimes than LGBT people. The cons got owned hard here. Thanks, Ethan, for your wit. We can all go home now. Or so you would think if you didn't actually read the study. Good God, why don't these people read the studies?
Why would you even go in this direction? I mean, there's no grooming from LGBTQ people. Like, what's the statistic have to really do with anything? I'm not really sure. Also, he's probably going to go with like proportionally. There might be more people that are LGBTQ committing these issues. I don't know. Is that what he's going to go with?
Is that they use. Well, outside of the fact that the whole reason he brought this study up is pure whataboutism, let me remind you that he's not actually responding to any of the points that conservatives and anti-woke people are making on this issue.
Okay.
But don't worry, Ethan, because I read the study for you. Cool. So we look at this table, and we can see that 80% of the people on the registry from the study are straight, and 20% of them are LGBT. Does anyone see an issue with those numbers? I feel like any person with more than 5 seconds of research experience would be able to point out that there isn't a 50-50 split between LGBT people and straight people.
Yeah, proportionally, I think like what is LGBTQ identifying people like 1 or 5%? So like yeah, this is disproportionately higher
in America.
So like the way that I would go about that is to say that unfortunately, when kids are young, especially young boys, you can generally tell if they're gay or feminine. Like it's pretty easy to identify especially young boys that act more feminine. They tend to be outcasted. They're more vulnerable to be abused. And unfortunately, if somebody is abused as a kid, in some instances, they become an abuser themselves. And so when I look at that, that's where I would say it comes from more than anything else. If you have a little boy that's molested and abused, they're going to have a higher chance of doing the same thing when they grow up. It's an unfortunate reality of the way that like trauma manifests itself. It doesn't speak poorly to LGBTQ people. It's just an unfortunate reality. So that's how I would that would potentially make sense to me, because a more feminine boy is going to tend to not have as many friends. He's going to be seen as weird and outcasted. He's going to have like less people watching him. He's going to be more vulnerable. His parents may like him less, especially back in the day. And have like less concern to care about them, et cetera, et cetera. So
gay people are a minority, and people like Ethan should know that because they never stop mentioning it. Current day estimates on the high end put LGBT people at 7% of America, which means that according to this study, LGBT people commit sex crimes at roughly 3 times the rate of straight people. Great job, Ethan. With friends like you help.
They're probably not a great. This argument for Ethan is so dumb. This does not help the conversation. Okay.
Out the LGBT crowd.
Imagine not understanding statistics. What are you saying? Are you okay, dude?
Who needs enemies?
Okay.
Now, his interpretation could have been a simple mistake, so let's say Ethan is not very good at math, which might make you question where he gets the audacity to quote research. But let's say he can't do math. Even if that's the case, in one of the paragraphs directly above the table that he read off of, it says, the proportion of LGBT people in our sample is almost 4 times that of a recent national estimate of LGBT identification among adults in the United States. To be clear, the percent identification at the time of the study was 5.6%. But they straight up give him the answer, and he still screws up.
There is no evidence that queer people are grooming kids into becoming gay, or really are.
There really isn't any evidence of that, but I mean, like, I don't think that this was the way to go about that. You're kind of just giving ammunition to people.
Harming children at a disproportional rate at all. It's just not there.
Yeah, there's no evidence of LGBT people harming children at a disproportional rate, except for the research that you just showed. I mean, I haven't seen a fumble this bad with research since I did the video on Noah Samson, where he cited a bunch of studies that you could easily see were arguing against the points he was making if you just read more than one sentence outside of the abstract. And then he tried to cover that up in a follow-up video after I pointed out.
Where's the Ethan video, or Ethan is online video that he does this? I want to look at the statistic that he's supporting here.
how bad at research he was.
Noah Samson, friend of the show, good buddy of mine. Yeah, he has a good mustache.
Of course they're friends. Birds of a feather flock together.
What is this video that he's referencing? Do we know?
Ethan also is or was best friends with Nick is Not Green
Evidence.
and participated in the false allegations and slander of SuperMega. I'm not
Yeah, kind of true. Kind of based.
going to explain that whole thing, but if you are aware of the drama, then it's very telling of what kind of person Ethan is. Though if you do want the full context, then Turkey Tom did a video on the whole situation. Not to mention that Ethan will flip out if people criticize the fat acceptance movement and call people bigots for telling others to take care of their health. So he gets offended when people point out that obesity is a thing that people can control. Yet Ethan thinks it's perfectly fine to make fun of multiple creators who are bald or balding, which really can't be controlled.
His hairline. Also, if he takes his beanie off too, if he has to take his beanie off. If I described to you a balding white man with a podcast who peaked in high school, you'd probably be able to perfectly capture exactly what this man looks like.
That's really funny.
What's the video being referenced? I'm trying to find it. Oh, maybe he has it. Video links. The groomer narrative is a lie. Okay, great. Thank you.
Happy Pride Month. It's gay people's...
Shush. I didn't know how old it was. It looks... It probably isn't that old. That was it. Oh, it's 7 months old. Okay, so it's a little bit old.
Comes from a guy who obviously doesn't take care of his health, a guy who dresses like he still lives with his parents, and a guy who constantly brags about smoking weed despite having asthma.
Also, I have asthma, and a lot of heavier people do as well.
Maybe put that vape pen down for a minute and give your lungs a break. Certainly nobody should be listening to this guy on any topics that involve health, nor should they be listening to him on topics that require research, because that error that I talked about isn't the only fumble that Ethan made. Now, I will apologize that you'll have to pay close attention, because he goes through these next couple of things quickly, and it's easy to miss what he's saying.
Queer people are more likely to be incarcerated. 84% of queer sex offenders have been to prison or jail.
He says...
Is he trying to say that we have a higher likeliness of putting gay sex offenders in jail? I mean, if that's true, they still deserve to be in jail. I guess put the straight ones in jail too? I don't know.
That LGBT people are more likely to be incarcerated because he added up the values in the prison and jail-only columns, and the LGBT numbers were higher than the numbers for straight people. So his narrative is that LGBT people are experiencing unfair discrimination because they go to jail more often for sex crimes and serve longer sentences, which means they're being oppressed.
Well, it looks like percentage-wise. I gotta actually focus on this video. Let's see. I gotta read statistics, guys. Oh! Sorry, that didn't happen. That actually did not happen right now. Don't worry about it, guys. I said that. All right, I just want to read this statistic really quick. All right. So incarceration type, so prison or jail only. I guess LGBTQ people have jail only, but they statistically go to prison more, whereas straight cisgender people do not go to prison as much. So the implication here is that, and then there's a higher amount of no prison or jail time for straight people. So the implication here is that there is a higher incarceration rate or a higher penalty against LGBTQ sex offenders. More than half of respondents had been incarcerated in prison for their sex offense conviction, or more LGBTQ than straight cisgender adults. Okay. Likewise, fewer LGBTQ adults receive no prison or jail time. I mean, maybe that could be some kind of homophobia, I guess, in the system, being more harsh on gay people committing crimes against. Maybe. Okay. Okay.
Unfortunately, Ethan, you can't determine that by just looking at the numbers, because LGBT people might be going to jail or prison more often because they commit more crimes or more severe crimes.
Well, yeah, they might commit more severe crimes. That could be true. I don't know if it references this in the article. Okay, that's possible. I don't know. It's possible that they're committing more severe crimes. It's also possible that because it's too gay to, I imagine because men tend to make up most of the sex crimes in general. Not that women don't engage in that, but there might be, a judge might have some kind of I don't know, subconscious bias to be more harsh on a guy who assaults another guy. I don't know, maybe. Or maybe that's not true. Maybe they'll be like, well, how come you couldn't defend yourself? Because then there's also sometimes a downplaying of male victims. There's so many things here. I wouldn't go with this. I wouldn't go in this direction. I feel like there's so many holes that could be picked through. I don't think that you're going to win the conversation or you're going to change any conservatives' minds here. Yeah, you'd have to read the whole study. There's so many different factors. I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it. I just don't know. I don't know if this is a productive. I don't know that this is productive in the conversation. You know, the last argument he came up with was kind of bad. I don't know. But we'll keep going.
People don't always go to jail on their first offense. Where's
True.
your evidence that these LGBT sex offenders are being unjustly incarcerated by a more biased court system? Because personally, I don't see any. Ethan is just seeing a disparity and assuming it's
I mean, we see a disparity, so there's something there. It does, but the disparity could be explained away. So, yeah.
because of oppression. Now, if only this study included some sort of information about the crimes being committed, that would let us know if oppression was actually occurring.
Sure, like what the severity was. Yeah, sure.
Oh, wait, it does.
Does it?
It turns out that LGBT people go to prison more often because they abuse more people. There's more.
Let's see. I gotta go do this. Look at this again. Person, adult, identified to number of victims identified. Okay, LGBTQ, straight, cisgendered. Okay, yeah, it seems like there's higher amounts. The victim was a family member. I wonder how they're doing this. I wonder if they're considering these. I need to look at the actual study. Does he have the actual study? I wonder if they're he doesn't have it in here, I don't think. Or maybe I just don't know how to read. I wonder if they consider the person LGBTQ. Or if they commit an act against like a person of the same sex. I know it sounds so weird, but like if a guy molests a child, they're not LGBTQ, they're a pedophile. That's why I'm asking the question. I wonder how they categorize LGBTQ people versus like, are they actually LGBTQ, or are they conflating like a pedophile as an LGBTQ person because the guy molested a little boy? You know what I mean? It's just a question I have. Okay.
Numbers that he gave on prison statistics, but the disparities aren't that big, and they can easily be explained away when you account for the number of crimes committed. But wow, it's this kind of lazy research that makes titles like "Lazy Content is Radicalizing People" extremely ironic. Yes, when you're too lazy to actually look at the numbers and use critical thinking skills, you will radicalize people into believing there's unfair discrimination when there's actually not.
There might be. Just to be clear, there might still be unfair discrimination. I don't know based on these. There's a lot of open-ended statistics here. I know that gay people have historically been, hit with different types of oppression and discrimination. Let's not pretend that they haven't. So...
What a crowd of people to run the oppression narrative on, by the way.
And yeah, I mean, like I said before, people who are molested have a higher chance of being molesters. In general, like there's a chance that you will kind of continue the cycle. It's an unfortunate reality. And if you have a whole, especially historically, men who are getting sexually assaulted tend to not be valued or cared about as much as women who are assaulted, and so that could contribute to the issue, like another issue of oppression as well. So there's like a lot of, there's a lot of different factors going on there.
A bunch of child abusers. Most of these crimes, LGBT or straight, are sex crimes against minors. But we aren't.
Yeah, see, there you go. So if they're most crimes against minors, like a pedophile isn't a gay guy. So if they're just saying that, and I don't know if that's how they're doing the statistic. I couldn't tell you. I would imagine they probably are, but I could be wrong. So I'm not going to hold too firm on that. But if they're conflating somebody who molests a little boy, like a guy who molests a little boy, to a gay person, that's just not true. Gay people aren't pedophiles, right? So that's obviously incorrect. So you shouldn't be conflating the two.
Aren't done. We have one more galaxy brain take from Ethan here on this study.
Keep in mind, these straight people that are getting shorter sentences or sometimes not seeing jail at all are doing more sexual assault of minors, indecent exposure, more.
Hold on, are they?
Or sometimes not seeing jail at all are doing more sexual assault.
Rape or sexual assault. Yeah, well, proportionally, they're not doing more. Okay.
Of minors, indecent.
I'm trying to see. It looks like, am I reading the numbers wrong? Is that a percentage?
Exposure, more molestation.
Are these percentage of the crimes?
More illegal recording and more solicitation, which would cover grooming.
Holy crap! I can't believe.
I'm so confused. I don't know how to read these statistics.
More molestation.
I don't know how these statistics are meant to be read. Straight, cisgender, child molestation. Is this the percentage of them? Oh, I guess it's 21.9% of the child molestation are straight and 20.3% are LGBTQ. Okay.
More illegal recording and more solicitation.
They're pretty close numbers, though. I don't know. I just feel like this video's a miss.
Which would cover grooming.
Holy crap, I can't believe there's someone who is worse at research than Noah Samson. He's like, straight people have a higher percentage of solicitation than gay people. The numbers are 8% and 7.8%. Are you kidding? Do you guys remember when Noah Samson tried to gaslight everyone when I pointed out that men play video games 20% more than women do? And he's like, 20% more is not even that big of a deal. It's just 15 minutes a day. If that's true, then women making 20% less money in the workplace than men shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? I'm
a little confused about your point. Is your point that the numbers are What is your point?
Anyway, Noah's friend here is talking about a 2.5% difference and trying to make it look like the Grand Canyon. Yes, the math is correct on that. It's a 2.5% difference between 8 and 7.8.
Sure.
Considering that only 1,000 people were studied here, with a difference that small, you could have easily closed the gap by surveying more people or by surveying a different group of people.
Okay.
I'm going to throw out the data point on voyeurism because it doesn't happen that often on either end, but look at these categories.
Not if you don't catch me.
Almost the same number in every one, and if we're adjusting for population size, you have to note that LGBT people are committing these crimes at almost 4 times the rate.
Yeah, maybe. Sure. Again, I don't think pedophiles aren't LGBTQ, and I don't know how they're recording the statistics, so, but sure.
Interesting that Ethan said nothing about the
Yeah. Unfortunate.
category that LGBT people were higher in, which was
I would just want to ask this guy, like, what do you think that means? Like, I would want to I didn't mean to get that, but well. I would want to ask this guy, like, what do you think it means that there are more LGBTQ people committing these crimes? You know, because that's the thing that we're not hearing. So I would want to know what his explanation is.
Owning, manufacturing, or distributing sexually explicit material of minors. He couldn't have missed it. It's the first category on the list. Why make this big deal about how conservatives don't like to look at facts and data, and then leave out the biggest percentage gap on the chart? This guy was making a mountain out of a 0.2% difference when there's a 6% difference on the first data point. I mean, this makes you look really dishonest and really unwilling to levy any nuance or information that makes your side look bad. Okay. Stuff like that is what radicalizes people. Now, surely he doesn't mess up more, right? Actually, he does.
Let's talk about John Roach. John Roach was a Catholic archbishop in the Twin Cities from the 70s until the 90s. Listen, I know I said Catholic, and yes, it's exactly what you think. It is pretty extensively documented how much of a pedophile defender Archbishop John Roach was. It's no news that the Catholic Church is full of creepy freaks. We already...
Yeah, I mean, it's an unfortunate reality. There was a huge network of like priests molesting kids, and then they would just move the priest to a different place instead of doing anything about it, for sure. Like, that's true. It's an unfortunate reality that it was covered up for so long.
We already know. Everyone knows. But all these conservatives all say the same shit about gay people. And listen, if you're friends with pedophiles and you say...
You found the actual source? Can you put it in the Discord and let me know when you link it in there? Like, put it in the general if you could.
Same stuff as pedophiles. I don't know if you're all that good of a guy. I don't know.
This one's going to be embarrassing. Ethan throws a lot of shade at the Catholic Church for sex scandals in the past. Rightfully so, because some of the people in the Catholic Church have committed some disgusting behavior.
Sure.
Here's where it gets good. Ethan uses that creepy Catholic Church argument to suggest that conservatives are a bunch of child abusers. So I did some research and found that according to Pew data, half of all Catholics are Democrat. Here's an older study from 2014.
Okay, cool.
Where it shows that more Catholics identify as Democrat than they identify as Republican.
All he had to do was a single Google search with some relevant terms to find this survey. It took me 10 seconds. It's really...
I mean, it's a good point. Like, it's not a bad point. I mean... Sure. Okay.
Not that much work, but he didn't do it.
It literally only took me a minute of research to
sure.
find this data. I mean, it's fine to be bad at research, but if you're going to fail this hard, then being less arrogant would be a much better decision when it comes to optics.
Why are all the pedophiles hiding with the conservatives?
I'll just leave this Jeffrey Epstein article here. Also, since he made such a...
Really not a very good... oh, man, it actually has pages on it. There's really not a very good... not a particularly good argument from our buddy, but okay.
Sweeping statement. All I have to do is find a single example to disprove him. His name is Jerry, and he got a 12-year sentence for soliciting photos from minors and sexual assault. Actually, considering that he used one example from 30 years ago of one person being protected by the Catholic Church, and I technically provided 2 examples, in an Ethan-like fashion, I'm going to declare myself as the winner. At least my examples were recent and not like, in 1872, a possible Republican abused a child, therefore all Republicans are child abusers. On top of that, he actually gave more examples of children at drag shows than he gave of possible conservatives being child abusers. I've never seen a content creator take so many L's in my life. Let's go over one last thing.
Even though there's no evidence to support that you can turn someone else gay, much less a child. But yeah.
Well, yeah, there's no evidence that you can do that. All right, this just seems to study... Okay, I'm just kind of looking through the findings. The average age among residents was 51. Okay, we're white, and that 20% of those lesbian, gay, bisexual. Okay, so these look like they might be identifying as the... Okay. The average age among respondents was 51. 87% were white, and 20% identified as lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, pansexual, and or transgender LGBTQ. Okay, so they self-identify. Okay. Most respondents were men, and with fewer LGBTQ respondents identifying as men than straight cisgender. Okay, interesting. Almost 90% of the respondents had just one sexual offense conviction. 6% had an additional sexual offense conviction following the first incident. I feel like, I don't know. I would want to see the statistics that aren't self-identifying. like, hey, they're online and anonymous. It's like, hey, why don't we just pull data from some registry or something? Okay. Interesting.
Sure, let's say that there is any sort of legitimacy behind the idea that gay people are grooming kids. Not that there's any fucking study to support that ever, but, you know.
Considering that you're terrible at research, I have to ask, is there no evidence? Or are
There's no evidence, no.
you unwilling to accept any evidence that you could be wrong?
What evidence? I mean, what evidence do you have that it's happening?
Obviously, this is not something that can be studied directly, because when you do research, you have an obligation to do no harm, which means a direct study would be immoral, because it would be child abuse to try and change a child's orientation for science. So any evidence to prove that kids can be groomed in this way would have to be indirect. And when we talk about indirect evidence, there's actually a lot.
Where? Oh, okay. Let me see.
Here's an NBC News article titled, "Percentage of LGBTQ adults has doubled over the past decade. If
That doesn't change anything.
younger Americans continue to come out at increasing rates, the proportion of adults who identify as LGBTQ will exceed 10% in the near future."
So just to be clear, more people identifying as LGBTQ is not any evidence that there's some kind of grooming going on, okay? One, people feel more comfortable coming out. Two, the majority of those people are going to be bisexual, which means nothing. And three, I would say that sexual orientation is somewhat a little bit fluid based on how you were raised. I don't think it's massively fluid. You can't, unless you're in a super intense environment like prison. You got fully straight guys going to prison that end up being gay, at least in that environment, because it's like, you kind of got to make do, I guess, sometimes. But just generally speaking, like everybody is pretty much born going to be gay or straight, and then there's a little bit of flexibility, different ways depending on how conservative or progressive or you've been raised. Like I imagine if I was raised in a little bit more of a progressive household, I might be able to be a little more gay. But just because more people are identifying as LGBTQ, especially in a time where it's trendy to identify as LGBTQ. It's trendier to be LGBTQ. Some people are lying. LGBTQ encompasses a lot of things. There's probably a lot of kids that are exploring their gender, being like, I'm non-binary. That'll probably grow out of it, and it's more acceptable. This isn't proof that anybody's getting groomed into any direction. This is just I think that this guy thinks that it's happening, and that's probably the biggest thing. Like very clearly, I guess I'd have to ask this guy: do you think it's bad to be gay? Because it seems like you're saying that if you're thinking people are grooming people to be gay. But okay, and I imagine if you can groom somebody to be gay, you can groom somebody to be straight. So, are there straight people out there grooming people to be straight? I don't know. I don't know. This seems like a little bit weird. Okay. Yeah, so he agrees that conversion therapy is child abuse. Trying to change somebody's... Yeah, sure. So do you think that the conversion therapy of gay kids, forcing them to be straight or by going to gay camps or whatever, you think that's abuse then, right? Like you understand that's abuse. There's so many different things here. How do you explain frogs turning gay? Thank you so much for the 11-month small gut. You know what? That's a good point. I can't. I don't think they turn gay though. Don't they turn trans or something? Hey, country boys, just make do, baby. You know what I'm saying?
Currently, it's at 7%, which means 10 years ago, it was roughly 3.5%.
Okay.
This article was written in 2022, and if you were an adult from the years of 2012 to 2022, like I was, then you might have noticed that there was a heavy push towards marketing LGBT stuff towards kids.
I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. What?
You had genderless parenting, inappropriate books in school libraries.
Wait, this is new. What?
Were an adult from years ago, it was roughly 3.5%. This article was written in 2022, and if you were an adult from the years of 2012 to 2022, like I was, then you might have noticed that there was a heavy push towards marketing LGBT stuff towards kids.
No, there wasn't.
You had genderless...
genderless... What? This is an article. Okay.
Parenting, inappropriate books in school libraries.
This is one book. It's debatable whether it's inappropriate. How much of an impact do you think that genderqueer... How many kids do you think were actually reading this boring fucking book?
You had the later seasons of Degrassi that made every main character LGBT. Ethan was a teenager.
I guess you could go with Blue's Clues. I mean, I guess maybe you have a little bit of an argument there. There's a bigger push to talk about people being LGBTQ. I don't think that there's like a groomer narrative attached to it. I think it's just kind of gay. Yeah, I don't think that every character needs to, because it's not just LGBTQ. Everybody's got to be fucking black. Everybody's got to be gay. Everybody's got to be fucking trans. Everybody's got to be woke. I'm not trying to have like my old man rant, but it's like, there's no more, like, just give me a couple that's not mixed race. I'm fine with mixed race. Just give me 2 black people. Why has everybody got to be a black and a white person or this? You know what I mean? It's like but I don't think that's necessarily grooming kids. But I guess epic Degrassi reference, in my opinion.
at this time, so he probably doesn't know that there is a stark difference between the time when I was a teenager in the 2000s.
But couldn't you argue that if there's all this material that's talking about how everybody's gay, by this logic, if you think that that's making people more gay, then in the past when we only had straight relationships being shown, wouldn't that also potentially groom people and cause them to be straight? Like, you have to go both ways on the narrative. So all we're really showing is that, like, I guess sexuality can be somewhat fluid based on the availability of media around you, which might be true. Yeah. Cool, I guess.
When the mindset was, oh, hey, there's a gay person. Cool. Anyway, to the 2010s when the narrative was,
I don't know if that's true. It was pretty controversial to put gay people and stuff back then, but okay.
We need to make sure that kids know that gay people exist every second of the day.
I agree with
so
that.
After a decade of that, what a surprise, there are more LGBT people. However,
yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it's causing people to be LGBTQ. I think some people are just feeling more comfortable coming out, and then there are some people that are just trending on it because they think it's cool. Like kids are like, oh, that's cool. Like because when I was in school, because I'm older, everybody was like all the people that wanted detention would be like, oh, I'm bisexual. It's like, okay, you know what I mean? Like they weren't really bisexual. I imagine maybe something similar to that's happening. Maybe for some people, not everybody, but maybe for some people.
However, I'm sure one of these people will say, yeah, but that's just because everyone's more accepting now, so people feel more comfortable coming out.
That is
All
true.
you have to do to disprove that idea is to look at the Gallup poll that NBC is
How do you disprove that
referencing, and notice that all the adults who are now identifying as LGBT are like freshly 18 Gen Zers.
What is that? How does that dismiss that argument?
You don't see a massive increase in the percentages of people identifying as LGBT past the millennial generation.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect to because people are more established. You would expect more people that are like in their maybe their early 20s and younger identifying because they're not as established. They're still exploring and finding themselves. Somebody that's like 30 plus, like mid 20s even, they kind of know themselves for the most part and who they are. So you're not going to see them change that direction. That doesn't dismiss anything, man. What are you talking about? I'm not even saying that's the only factor. I think it's at least one of the factors. Sure, there could be more, but like you're not dismissing that. You're just pretending that you dismissed it, but okay.
Most notably, Gallup said that the numbers went up from 5.6 to 7.1 during COVID between the years of 2020 and 2022, when every blue-haired teacher was ratting themselves out on TikTok, telling people how they were replacing the American flag with the pride flag, and indoctrinating elementary school kids with gender theory.
Just to be clear, I'm sure there are some crazy teachers. Most of them are not doing any of these things. Libs of TikTok, I enjoy dunking on annoying progressives too. But what happens is like you get psyoped. You know, you have a page that shows you everything that you hate, and you think that everything that you hate is super commonplace, right? Like people get psyoped into this shit all the time. You know, it's the same thing as like there's accounts where some people love to watch it where it's like a black guy hurting people or a white guy hurting people, and they'll specifically like, see, look at all these white people, look at all these black people. That's what creates a lot of this. That's one of the problems with the information generation. So like, yeah, there are annoying people that are bad, but most are not. I know that's a hot take. Sorry, I guess. So yeah.
Instead of teaching them useful stuff like math. Not to mention that Pew
I think they're still learning math, though, to be honest with you.
Came out with a study saying that trans and non-binary identification is through the roof in young adults from 18 to 29.
Yeah, it is.
Wasn't this like...
Oh, what was it? He said trans and... Did you say trans and...
Only point non-binary identification is through the roof in young adults from 18 to 29.
For sure. It's higher. What does it say?
Wasn't this like only 0.4% of adults just a few years ago?
Yeah. So just to be clear, like the trans umbrella is like, it's mostly non-binary people because non-binary people fall under that trans blanket. Listen, there are some people who are non-binary. I get it, but a lot of it is people that are experimenting with their identity, and sometimes I think people are just doing it for attention. I'm just gonna be real with you. You know, non-binary doesn't really mean it doesn't mean nearly as much as somebody who's like legitimately has gender dysphoria and is actually trans. So you know, I'm just saying that would probably explain that. Like, okay.
How is it like 10 times that now in younger people? So there we have it.
Okay.
A leftist mainstream news outlet, Gallup, and Pew are all saying that LGBT numbers are skyrocketing right around the same time that there is constant promotion of it. What a coincidence. Here's the part that's more worrying, and why I think that the groomer title is appropriate. While I do think the born this way narrative is true for the majority of the LGBT crowd, I also think that there is evidence that childhood trauma can change someone's sexual orientation.
There might be. So there's two different ways you can interpret it. There is trauma associated with like LGBTQ. One of them, like I said earlier, could be that gay and trans people, kids, are identified are more vulnerable. They're more vulnerable to abuse. Like that's just kind of like a reality of the situation. Like I said before, they are ostracized because they're considered weird and different, and that could be part of it. Or it could be that like a significant event like that could change. It could have an impact. We talked about some people getting molested as children, causing them to have a higher chance of molesting people as well. Sure, I don't think that you can't just change it though, right? So even if a trauma in your past did create, make you LGBTQ, which I'm not sure is true, but even if that was true, you can't just be like, okay, stop, right? Somebody with PTSD, whether they were sexually assaulted and had to go to war, you can't just be like, all right, stop. Oh, you have PTSD because you were attacked in the middle of the night and all your friends died. Okay, so we'll stop. You can't just stop it. You can acknowledge the behavior, or you can acknowledge the cause of the behavior. It doesn't mean that you can change it. So even if there is a trauma linked to it, it doesn't change anything. Just to be clear.
This is something that Dr. Drew says a lot.
The clearest way I can sort of help you understand it is this, and this is an important concept for everyone to get in their head,
okay.
Is that when awful things happen in childhood, when things that terrorize us in childhood happen, physical abuse, sexual abuse are sort of the paradigms, abandonment, something about those experiences, and I'm going to use a biological sort of way of describing it.
I don't like Dr. Drew. By the way, I just don't like him because of the whole Ethan and Trisha thing. Is so weird. He seems to be paid for, okay?
Wires our brain in such a way as to, and this is going to sound kooky, but it's simply how humans work.
Okay.
Terror gets converted into attraction around the age of puberty. So we start getting attracted to people and circumstances that really reenact the traumas all over again.
That being
I wouldn't doubt that, sure.
said, I found that...
What does that mean to you, though, think before you sleep? What does that signal to you? Does that signal to you that being gay is bad or being trans is bad? Or does that signal to you that different people have different life experience that can have an impact on who they are as a person?
This 2001 study that says that gay men and lesbian women were significantly more likely to have experienced child sexual abuse.
Okay, that might be true. Sure.
That's some evidence that something's going on here.
Wow, that's some evidence something's going on here. Yeah, I've already stated the potentials. It could be that trauma has shaped them in that way. It could be that they're more vulnerable because of the way that they already were. Sure. I just need you to be more specific because it feels like you're almost afraid to say like what you actually think about some of these topics.
However, that's just what the abstract says, so let's look further into the actual study. This study surveyed about 1,000 people in a California college classroom and at a Pride Parade booth. Here are all the questions they asked. They also gave criteria for what was considered abuse. The victim had to be 16 or under, with the perpetrator at least 5 years older. The perpetrator also had to be at least 16 years old. Honestly, I think that criteria is a little light because it largely removes child-on-child abuse, where a child who is usually a prior victim...
Sure, I mean, I agree with that. You should add them as well.
...will do something like abuse a 10-year-old when they're 11. Personally, I would like to see a study on this topic with adults who are victimized...
I think that the reason that they would remove that is because they would typically identify that and label that as a behavioral problem, not like a pedophile problem or a predatory problem. Because a lot of, like, that would be considered like a behavioral until you're usually like 16. I mean, by the definition of pedophilia in the DSM-5. So that's probably why they're talking about it like that. Although I do kind of agree. I think it could still be just as traumatic, but sure.
Under the age of 13, because trauma during pre-puberty is way more harmful than trauma post-puberty. Anyway, here's the chart that we're looking for. It shows the number of victims who identified as gay or lesbian after the abuse, and it's about 1/3 of the victims for each category.
Okay, well, I mean, they were probably too young to identify as gay before the abuse, so it's not like you have any comparison before or after.
Also note that gay and lesbian identifying participants were far more likely to have been abused by a same-sex perpetrator. That's pretty decent evidence that you can change someone's orientation with trauma.
Well, no, it's not. What?
1/3 of the victims for each category. There are victims who identified as gay or lesbian after the abuse, and it's about 1/3 of the victims for each category. Also note that gay and lesbian identifying participants were far more likely to have been abused by a same-sex perpetrator. That's pretty decent evidence that you can change someone's orientation with trauma.
It's something. It exists.
Sebastian
I don't know if it's evidence of that, but okay.
$1.99 just came across you.
Thanks, brother.
Hope next time it's on you.
I don't even know what that means. Is that a threat? Okay, anyway. I mean, it might. I don't know. The problem is that they're studying people that are so young that they're not going to know what their sexual orientation is. Like, even at 16, you're not necessarily going to know. So, you know, especially since I think that was the maximum limit. So a lot of them are probably younger than that. So I don't know if it's that they changed them or not. Maybe. What do you think that means is my question. Like, what do you think that means? Do you think that means that being gay is bad? Like, that's the problem, is I feel like we don't get a firm answer from Think Before You Sleep about this. I think, and that's why it makes it seem like a dog whistle. Do you think that it's being gay is bad? Are you a little bit afraid to not condemn it because you feel like your audience might not like you? I don't know if any of these are true. I'm just like wondering, like, be a little more specific about it.
It's not 100%, but it does happen. I think if you had more questioning, like the specific age of the first instance of abuse.
Oh, you think that guy was coming on to me? Oh, I wish. What's going on, Willard? Willie Mac, how you doing, brother?
And a definition of abuse that includes perpetrators who are under 16, you would see more participants saying that their orientation changed after the abuse.
But how would they? If they're, like, you don't even know if you're gay or straight when you're, like, 13. So, how would that communicate that? I'm a little bit confused. It's not like these, like, when I was like, 14, I was questioning myself. I was afraid I'd be fucking gay, dude. Because that's gay. Who wants to be fucking gay? No, it was much worse to be gay when I was younger, so I felt more uncomfortable about it. But, okay. Interesting. I want to know what he thinks it means. Fuck.
Moving on, let me ask, what do groomers do? Well, they
the groomers groom, I guess.
Expose kids to adult material. That act typically precedes getting physical. On that note, as far as I found, this book, Genderqueer, has been reported to have been used in middle schools. I can't show it, but this book contains full-on explicit content.
So just to be clear, I've looked over the book, and like the materials of that book are not sexual in nature. I'm not saying that it's an appropriate book, but it's not sexual. Like there are some. It's, I believe, from what I remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's about some non-binary person who was talking about their life growing up. It's not necessarily about it's not like about like, oh, how good it is. I don't know. You're trying to make it seem like it's supposed to be a sexual book that's supposed to like cause kids to, maybe I'm misinterpreting it. I don't know. But I don't think that this book is like all the fucking rage. It's not required reading material. I think that like a 16 or a 17-year-old could probably read it. Like you can see a penis or a vagina in a book as long as it's not porn. Like anatomy books have stuff like that in them. I don't think that kids are going to fucking explode. They're not going to like fucking die, you know?
You cannot show this stuff to kids. Middle school in America is ages 11 to 13. This is not appropriate for an 11-year-old, and it's probably not really okay for a 13-year-old to see this.
Was it in a middle school? I thought it was in high schools. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Is that the whole thing? Genderqueer.
What kids commonly see on the internet these days. Also, more recently, there's this thing that happened here involving New York middle schools, which was weird as fuck.
I think it was in school libraries.
These people should be in jail, but young...
I mean, I think it's fine that they banned it, I guess. I don't really care. Published in 2019, this person's memoir was awarded 2 2020 prizes by the American, including, okay, I don't care. Given to book publishers for adults that also have the appeal for youth. I don't know what that means, but the book was labeled adult. So this would be the library's fault. Okay. The book tells the story of the person who wrote its adolescent journey towards coming out as non-binary, having a gender identity that is not solely male or female, but critics have seized on the sexually explicit illustrations of the book for one of the reasons for the concern. I also think the book is a lot explicit than it could be or would have been if it was written by a different author. That's fair. To say it was too explicit is fine, but I don't know. The problem with the groomer narrative is it's very intentionalized. If you're saying, hey, I think this is inappropriate, that's perfectly fine. But when you say it's grooming narrative, what you're saying is that this person who wrote the book is trying to groom children. But this person made the book for like 18 people who are 18, but it's like a coming of age story. That's why I have like the intentionality of the word grooming. It's just like so heavy. We just throw that word around so much nowadays.
Young kids who get exposed to adult material pre-puberty often describe it as weird and a frightening experience.
I was jacking off when I was 13, brother. It was definitely weird and frightening, I guess, but...
They describe it as traumatic. Speaking of kids...
What? No, what? Hold on.
...who are schools, which they see on the internet these days, year-old, and it's probably not really okay for a 13-year-old to see this, despite what kids commonly see on the internet these days. Also, more recently, there's this thing that happened here involving New York middle schools, which was weird as fuck. These people should be in jail. But young kids who get...
What happened? That was weird.
Happened here...
New York gave middle schoolers resources, which included shopping for sex dolls on how to enlarge your penis. What the fuck is this? Okay, that's not good, if this is true. I don't even feel like getting into it, to be honest with you.
Involving New York middle schools, which was weird as fuck. These people should be in jail. But young kids who get exposed to adult material pre-puberty often describe it as weird and a frightening experience.
Oh, do they?
They describe it as traumatic. Speaking of...
Oh. I mean, like, I wouldn't doubt it. I just want to... I feel like...
Pre-puberty often describe...
People who see... I mean, I saw boobies pre-puberty. I wouldn't describe it as a traumatic experience. I mean, I've seen porn before I was fucking, you know? I'm just like wondering, like, what is that based? Like, I don't know. I didn't have any fucking trauma from seeing tits when I was like fucking 11. I'm just wondering if they often describe it as traumatic. Seems intense. I mean, if they were molested, of course, but if they just saw a titty on something, I don't think they would describe that as traumatic. That's why I'm a little confused.
Describe it as weird and a frightening experience. They describe it as traumatic. Speaking of kids who are younger than 11, and often a lot younger than 11, despite how much channels like Ethan's or Noah's will gaslight you about what goes on at pride parades, there are tons of adults doing stuff in public in front of children that is not okay.
Sure, I agree with that. Pride parades shouldn't be as sexual as they are. It's fucking weird. I think it takes away from what pride is supposed to be about, just like honoring LGBTQ people of the past that have made a lot of progress. I agree with that.
I've never been like a Pride Month guy. And this is the first year I think I've ever remembered that it's happening.
Yeah, man, like I don't even care. First of all, I don't believe anyone has forgotten what month Pride Month is, because in June, every major business has rainbows and shit everywhere. Nice lie.
True.
Second, if you really aren't an expert on this stuff and haven't been involved with...
It's weird because I guess at pride parades, my wife was telling me, because she used to go to them before they became super sexual, but she doesn't like that kind of shit. She was telling me that like it's so commercialized now. PETA's there. There's people like trying to sell you weed and shit there. It's kind of weird. It kind of takes, I think it takes away a lot from what the event's supposed to be about.
With Pride, who are you to suggest that weird stuff doesn't happen at Pride? Now, as a person who actually has been to a pride parade, well, as a person who stumbled upon a pride parade on accident while he was in Austin, Texas a year and a half ago for a different event, I will...
this guy's coping, dude. He was fucking jacking off there.
I'll say that it was not...
He was dressed in the dog costume. He doesn't want anybody to know.
Not child-friendly. Last but not least on the groom...
Sure, probably isn't. Probably shouldn't bring your kids there, unfortunately.
Front, people who run...
But then if they made like a pride that was explicitly for children, like, hey, this is child-friendly pride, you'd probably complain about that too. You know what I mean? You'd probably like, say that they're trying to groom the kids.
Adult websites are actively trying to get straight people to watch LGBT content, and those sites want kids on them.
I remember this was the last video. The sites don't actively want you looking at this stuff. They just put it in your recommended tab sometimes to see if you'd like it. Like, oh, maybe. But again, he's trying to make it seem like that's grooming, because porn sites will recommend you trans porn if it's somewhat related to another video that you're looking at. That's all he's referring to. It's like the YouTube recommended, right? That's all he's talking about.
I was just taking the same approach in that they're the biggest, they're everywhere, so they need to appeal to every single niche. And I think they've done a lot to explore kind of every mainstream thing. So what they need to do now is they need to try to push stuff that's less accepted. Like putting a trans male or a trans female in a scene, you wouldn't get that on a normal mainstream site. So test it out. See if you get a bigger audience with it. See if you can convert somebody, right?
I mean, his language is weird, but like, all I'm hearing is like, yeah, we sometimes recommend videos that might have like a trans person in it so that you can potentially watch it. It doesn't seem that crazy to me. His language is really bizarre, but outside of that, like, that's all I'm really hearing. It's porn. It's commercialized. They're always trying to get you to look at different shit and potentially engage in it.
Like lonely, repressed 12-year-olds are going on trans angels and
I think
they're going on what?
I mean, like
12-year-olds are going like.
Do you think some like lonely, repressed
12-year-olds are going on trans angels and
I think so.
Probably, yeah. I mean, when I was 12, I was looking at women pissing on dudes. Like, I didn't look for it, but that's just what happened. But this is the problem: is it seems like you're trying to make it seem like that's the goal. No, dude, kids look at porn. I looked at porn when I was a fucking kid too. Like, I'm not saying it's okay or that you should be doing it, but there's an intentionality that keeps getting latched onto this. Like, it's not appropriate. But all that they're saying is like, do you think that like a 12-year-old is stumbling upon like this trans site because it's getting advertised on here? Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. I was looking at fucking piss. Like, I don't know. What do you want me to tell you, dude? Like, I was, when I was younger, I was into bukkake a lot for some reason. Really weird time in my life. Okay. You know, but that's just life, brother. It's not like they're trying to get you to do that. It's just what they're fucking doing. So,
I mean, like, think about it. Let's say you're 12 years old.
Okay.
You're still figuring out your sexuality, maybe even your gender.
Yeah, probably.
Wouldn't it be helpful to see, not a celebration, but just like maybe a normalization of something that you think
in the relation to sex, no, I don't think that's helpful. This guy's obviously a fucking weirdo, but okay.
Is what you want, you know? Probably helps a lot.
I don't know, dude. Not when it comes to porn. I don't think porn's good for young people. I jerked off to it a lot, but I'm not saying it's not good.
I think it shapes sexual attitude. Like, even if you find out you're not.
I know that's not normal, dude. I'm just saying.
That's not what you prefer.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Because, like, if, let's say I was...
That's not what you... shapes sexual attitude. Like,
I mean, yeah, it definitely shapes sexual attitudes. I think that this is why kids need more monitoring on the internet for sure.
Find out that's not what you prefer.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Cause
like I don't know if I didn't come across trans porn when I was younger. Maybe dude, dude, it's true. Oh God, I've got fucking psyop to liking trans women. I don't know if it's that deep, dude. I feel like I would have, or I already had like some kind of a predisposition. So you know.
If, let's say I was 12 and I saw like
porn is bad but also educational. I mean, that's the problem with porn, isn't it? That we don't have comprehensive sexual health education in classrooms. So kids are looking at porn to educate them, and then they're having blurred boundaries on like consent, which is one of the problems too.
Angels, I saw all these different sites. It would help me figure out what I do like and what I don't like.
This guy's a gooner. This guy goons too much.
Because if you're exposed to nothing, you have no idea, and maybe you're more like pliable.
The guy literally just admitted to child abuse, and
I don't think he's admitting to child abuse. I think he's a fucking weird guy that probably learned what's sex education through porn because his schooling was a failure.
Said it was a good thing. So even if you deny evidence that you can change a child's sexual orientation, there are certainly people out there who...
There's a difference between saying that you can change somebody's sexual orientation versus grooming somebody. That's the problem I have with this. Like, obviously, looking at different things can cause you to have a different preference for porn. I think everybody's a little bit malleable, but you're saying it's intentional grooming. You're adding a grooming element, trying to make it seem like LGBTQ people are like out of there, like desperately trying to cause this to happen. That's the problem with the video. That's it. Like you're putting too much energy into it. You're effectively dog whistling that like LGBTQ people are groomers. That's the problem with the video. Like the other stuff isn't so bad. Like yeah, of course, if you see something that becomes more normal to you, you're going to be more likely to be okay with it.
Papa, do you know about the cumulate? Don't look it up if you don't know.
I don't know about that. I don't want to look it up. All right, I'm not going to look that up. But that's like a totally different thing there. So, like, at the end of the day, I shouldn't have been looking at the type of material I was when I was younger, but, like, I'm not, it didn't have this, like, now that I'm not just straight anymore, I'm a little bisexual or whatever, it doesn't mean that the world is going to end. It doesn't mean that, like, I'm worse off as a person, right? So...
who say they're trying. But speaking of my last video, where I go into the problem of freely accessible adult content, with the age verification being, trust me, bro, the very real issue with all the LGBT propaganda, outside of the fact that we are currently in a birthing crisis, is that when young people are...
The birthing... Come on, dude. This is the problem, the birthing crisis, dude. I hate it when they try to pin the birthing crisis on more gay people. Again, like, dude, this guy is homophobic. It's okay. Like, listen, I'm not trying to be an asshole. I don't think he's the worst person in the world, but it's like, dude, you're so conspiracy brain. Okay, do you want to know why? First of all, we don't have a crisis, especially in America, because we have a lot of immigration coming in to offset our aging population. Second of all, we have technology that also helps displace our aging population. Third of all, it has nothing to do with LGBTQ people, and it has everything to do with the fact that, like, a myriad of other things. You could blame feminism more on the birthing crisis if you wanted to. Women are more focused on their jobs. That's one factor. So they're putting off having kids. That's probably the biggest one, but there's also a lot of financial aspects to it that are causing people to not really want to have kids as young as they used to. There's a lot of economic restraint. Those would be more explainable. So yeah, the lack of religion is part of it. I think that the lack of religion is something that you can't just be more religious, because a lot of times people get trapped in like loveless marriages. You know, people are having to learn to get into new relationships in a better way. Back then, it was like, okay, marry this person, you're with them forever, even if you're miserable, which a lot of people were miserable. Not everybody, but a lot of people. Now you have to learn what it means to love somebody, even though that you were, your parents didn't necessarily love each other. And, you know, the way that they treat each other is going to make you feel like their non-loving relationships were more normalized. So when you get into a relationship that's not necessarily loving, you're going to have a harder time identifying that you're not actually in love, that it's just something that you've learned to deal with because your parents, you know. There's a lot of different aspects to it. Yeah, and that can get to an even bigger thing because we have a higher like obesity rate, and people having kids later is going to increase the chance that your kid might have a disability. There's a lot of factors here, but it's not because gay people exist. Okay, so it's just so stupid. I hate it when people bring that up. It's just so dumb. But
exposed to sexually explicit material, particularly if it's before puberty.
Okay.
That material is traumatizing and causes them to...
It could be. It's not necessarily. You have to show us that because, like, again, I saw titties when I was young. It didn't traumatize me. If I was abused, it would have traumatized me. I think those are two different things. You made a claim that people describe it as traumatic. Seeing nudity, I mean, I need to see. Like, show me like where are you getting that from? What are you sourcing that from? I think most people, like, I saw fucking titties at like 11. You know, it is what it is.
To develop,
I'm not traumatized by it.
All kinds of
Cough
pathological.
Super chatted $2. I'm okay with P0RN helping me understand MF slur.
Okay. I mean, that's what I imagine. Most people who see some kind of gay porn or trans porn or something probably already were attracted to that, and then they got exposed to it, and they're like, oh, this is cool. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Behaviors and mental health issues by the time they become adults. And the great thing about people with mental health issues is that they're extremely easy to turn into useful idiots who will parrot any political agenda that you tell them to.
Oh, case in point, I guess, huh?
Which is why I think the powers that be spend so much time flooding LGBT stuff towards kids and do nothing to help prevent 8-year-olds from being exposed to adult content, like arresting people at Twitch for the artistic nudity rule change. It's not about...
Well, I mean, they banned them. What were they going to arrest them for? I don't think that they're like, oh my God, I want little kids to see this. There's a lot of adults on the platform, and they're... but okay.
Right. In terms of the LGBT crowd, they have had public acceptance for at least 20 years now.
No. First of all, gay marriage was, 2016? So that's 8 years, arguably. Second of all, it was a year or two ago when they were trying to ban gay marriage. So no, there hasn't been public acceptance of LGBTQ for 20 years. You're just making up a number. That's not even to talk about trans people, you know. And some of the complaints are valid, like trans women should not, in my opinion, compete with cisgender women in sports. But, you know, yeah, okay.
Literally no one cares if you're gay.
People still care if you're gay, but okay.
And gay people have had all the rights of straight people since 2015.
You just said that the oppression ended 20 years ago. And then you contradicted yourself, man.
Where's the discrimination? Now when they talk about LGBT rights, they talk about the right to give kids hormone replacement therapy.
No queer people are coming for any kid. Most queer people I know don't even want anything to do with kids. They don't even want to.
So just to be clear, when it comes to kids and taking HRT, it's a very sensitive topic that I am not 100% fleshed out on yet. But here's what you know. If you talk to any trans adult, they're all going to tell you that they knew that they were trans when they were a kid. That's number one. Number two, all the data that we have now that's available, and this is a new science, so it is changing every day, and it could change tomorrow. This could be wrong, but all the data we have points in the direction of like providing people with gender-affirming care that is age-appropriate. That might mean puberty blockers for some people. I'm not comfortable with the idea, but that's between a doctor, hopefully multiple doctors. You know, I would get a second and third opinion, the kid, and the parents, right? And if that was the best thing for the kid, are there cons to taking that stuff? Sure. But like, you know, for me to legislate that away, despite the fact that all the data points in the direction that that's the thing that's going to have the best outcomes for the kids. I mean, like, I'm not like that's it. That's life. It's uncomfortable. I'm not happy. Like, it's not something I'm like, oh my God, give kids these hormones. But if it's helping, the data suggests that that is what the direction needs to go, and things could change. It's a new science. New sciences change. But it's not that they're coming for kids. It's that they're trying to help people. Right? That's it.
Anything to do with kids.
Oh, wait. That doesn't happen.
The amount of minors that transition in this country is minuscule.
Oh, wait. I guess it does happen, but it doesn't happen that much, so we shouldn't worry about it? I mean, there are plenty of things that happen to small amounts of people that we should worry about, like school shootings. The reason we don't let 12-year-olds make permanent, significant, life-altering decisions is because a lot of people like...
We don't. It's not just it's the kids, it's the parents, it's the doctors, it's years and years and years and years of research. It's not just one thing. Are there some times that it gets wrong? Absolutely, and call that out. But it's not like I think the detransition rate is like 1%, and that's not just because people were misdiagnosed or feel they were misdiagnosed. In many of these instances, some people do it so they can have kids, or they'll detransition because they've hit a point where they were happy with their body and they don't need to take as many hormones or hormones as much at all anymore. Some people don't get financial or emotional support around them. There's so many factors here, and highlighting like this person, which they seem to have a bad relationship with being diagnosed as trans. It seems like it was a false or a bad diagnosis, and we should talk about that to make sure it doesn't happen, but that doesn't mean that all of them were bad. So
this person regret it when they turn 18. When you say LGBT kids are going to be harmed if we let the conservatives get in the way, do you ever think about the kids who got mastectomies or took hormones only to decide later, after permanently damaging their body, that they like their biological gender?
Yeah, that's terrible. They need to be diagnosed better. That needs to be studied and not happen. But what about like the 99 other people who had a positive experience with their transition? You know,
what about those kids? This all goes back to the arrogant Hassan style of argument.
It's like, so far the statistics, from my understanding, are like 1% misdiagnosis rate, right? So if the rate is 1%, it's terrible for those 1% of people, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen again by, you know, acting better. But I mean, that's a pretty high success rate. No, like, you know, again, things change. They're going to change. You know, we might find out that we're not doing everything exactly perfect. Then they might change a lot. They might change a little. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, we need more data.
Of anyone who's not on my side is evil. I mean, I watched this guy Ethan have a melty because Charlie White, a non-political streamer, effectively a normie, thought that leftist modern art was stupid.
Fascist propaganda and gamer streamer should
modern art is stupid.
Not be saying the same things.
I'm sorry your favorite YouTuber doesn't like exactly everything you like. This kind of mentality breeds a certain kind of narcissistic person who is terrible at seeing the viewpoints of others and never listens to feedback, so the points they make are incredibly weak, like trying to own your enemies with a study that you found that actually makes you look very bad. It's even worse when you realize that the biggest mistake that he made could have been avoided if he just read the 2 paragraphs that were directly above the table that he showed. Okay. The point being that arrogance, narcissism, and always believing that you're right is never a good way to find the truth. And only looking at things long enough for them to confirm your bias, like Ethan does, is a very lazy way of thinking.
I mean, I'd argue that you do the same thing, but...
The truth requires you to say, maybe I'm wrong. Is this data right? What are my opponents saying? And is there any validity to it? If you want the truth or the closest thing to it, then you should start...
I just don't think that you do this, brother. I don't know. You're kind of the opposite side of the same fucking coin.
...with doubt and disbelief, and see if the information still holds up. Anyway, thanks for watching. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.
Cool beans, man. Good video, brother. I gotta stop consuming this guy's videos. They're fucking brain rot, honestly. Pethan is a fucking idiot, so is this guy, honestly. They both just believe different things, and they don't really know why. They just, that's it. They have a particular belief, and then they find information that will affirm that belief, but they don't know how to parse through the information, generally speaking, and they're not really looking to change their minds. Okay, I like to think I'm not that person. I like to think that I look at information and then form an opinion, rather than form an opinion and then look for information to support it. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. What's my perfect weekend? Jacking off, dude. All weekend, baby. Blah, 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 blah.